No one knows the pressure you've been drowning.
Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Whatever part you're tuning in from, good morning, good afternoon, good day. Thank you is what I'd like to lead the day with, just for tuning in right here, right now with me. I'm just going to leave a few moments first to groove to the music. Hopefully you're hearing it a bit. Let a few more folks trickle in. In the meantime, we like to break the ice a little bit, let you know that this is meant to be interactive as possible. I like to, let me just lower down my music here a little. I like to hear myself talk, but at the same time, I do like to hear the folks in the room, and the whole point here is to be interactive, right? So, tell me where you're tuning in from. Let's lead with that. I'm tuning in from Miami. Few things I'd like to give some props to as well before we start things off today. Today is actually Flag Day in Curacao, so big shout out to that. Maybe some you didn't know holidays. I Forgot Day, which I didn't know as well, and World UFO Day is today as well. National Anisette Day, which is a type of drink. That's today as well. Two more big shout outs, just as far as holidays today. And why not, while I'm doing this, if I missed anyone, let me know if a holiday's happening where you're tuning in from, right? Carnival Tuesday, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Big up, big up. What's up? Carnival Tuesday. I know how that is being from Trinidad myself. So hats off. And Unity Day in Zambia. So what's up? Thank you once again. I just want to say thanks again for tuning in. This is chapter 4 of SQL Essential Training. Just want to say shout out to the now 260,000 learners that have signed up for this course. And this is just meant to be a live session, and again, as interactive as possible. So please do ask questions. Please do, just be as interactive as possible. And the way to do that is on the chat, right? It's going to be about 30, 45 minutes or so. So let's get things started. I just want to say a couple shout outs. What's up, Texas? What's up, New York? I'll be there pretty soon. So what's up, Missouri, Arkansas, just Texas, LA, Pennsylvania. What's up? Yeah. Thanks for being interactive and just breaking the ice. All right. So let's get things started. Let's get things kicked off. I am going to share my screen here. Things are going to look a little nutty for a sec. But let me jump over to the course. So, like I mentioned, this is meant to be a live session, just going through the chapters of the course. If you tuned in last couple of weeks, we did cover chapters 2 and 3. We got a little ambitious. It was just meant to be chapter 2, but we did actually do 2 and 3. And just a quick recap again as we go forward with this session, which is chapter 4, and we want to get into query writing. But just a quick recap of where we came from. A lot of what folks have had a little stumble with is where the exercise files were. And we walked through that in the last session. And we showed that in this overview area here, there is this show all, right? And once you click on that, there is the EX files SQL Essentials, but it's going to download on your desktop as a zipped file, just as it is here. The one step or the one hop I think trips people up. Once it's on your desktop, you have to unzip this file. On a Mac, which is what I'm on here, you double click. On a Windows, you right click if I'm not mistaken, and you go to unzip. Either or, you got to unpack that file, and in there, you'll see the various exercise files, including the sample database. And that's what we're going to go forward with. We kind of looked at the various areas here of the sample database. I'm going to just pop this up here. And how did I get here? We did install DB Browser for SQLite, which is the software that I'm on here. And that step that I just showed there, downloading the sample database file, once you have your DB Browser installed, you fire that up, and then you go to Open Database, and you locate that exercise files, the unzipped version of that. And that should say exercise files there. And in there, you'll see the WSDA music database, and you click on open, which I've already done, so I'm not going to do it twice. So that's where we kind of left off. And we looked at the various areas, just sort of high level of this piece of software. And now in this session here, just to jump back, keep us all apples to apples. That was our quick overview. We're going forward with chapter 4, right? Which is query composition and the various components to getting that done, okay? And that starts off with commenting. As you know, if you knew from the last session, please do drop some comments. So I'm gonna, jump back and forth. So you're gonna see me jumping back and forth here. Gonna look a little weird, but yeah, I'm gonna jump back and forth. And thanks, Kyle, respect due. I appreciate that. But I'm going to be doing just like this and just seeing if there's any questions, which I hope there are. So drop some questions. I'll be jumping back and forth like this. So that's how we're going to do it. All right, keeping pushing forward. Okay. So query composition. So the first step, if you recall, just for a quick recap, when we open this database, this sample database, in this database structure, this is sort of our first step into examining what this database is all about. It's our first peep into it. And here we could tell how many tables there are, which there are 11 here. And as we showed, you could expand every one of these tables and see the various fields within them. Not only can you tell the fields, you could tell certain attributes about these fields. For instance, with the album table that we have here, we have the album ID as the primary key, meaning that it holds only unique values in each and every single row of contents in this particular field, in this table. And that's denoted by this little key symbol here. And it is an integer type. It also tells us what type of data does it hold, right? So each and every one of these columns holds their own type of data. For instance, the title holds nvarchar, which is just variable characters, meaning text and numbers, for instance. So it holds text data in here, and again, integer in the artist ID. Artist ID, by the way, has a grayed out key, which denotes that it's the foreign key. It's a foreign key field. And what is a foreign key? It is the primary key of another table. So this foreign key sits in the album table, and it is telling us that it is pointing to another table, in this case, which is the artist table, okay? All right, a lot of information we could tell just from looking at the database structure. We did touch on the browse data. So whereas we can see the structure of things, which is great, we can't actually tell what's inside of these tables, but we can in the browse data tab here. And the very same 11 tables are displayed in this dropdown, and we could switch between each one of them and see the contents. And in the album table that we were looking at, we see the very same columns: album ID, title, artist ID, and the various types of data. As we saw, integer for both the IDs, album and artist, and that nvarchar, which is that text type data holding the various titles, okay? Another peep into it. By the way, important number here, the 347, we can't tell how many rows or how much data this particular table is holding, in this case, 347 rows, okay? So again, another way that we could find some more insight into this particular table. All right, let's get into the meat of the matter, which is query writing. So what's our first step? We did start off this particular chapter in the course with commenting, and it's very important. Commenting is a plain English way of communicating to yourself as a data architect, as a data analyst, and to others, right, who may inherit your work, right? So what are comments? Plain English ways of describing the query that you're about to compose, basically. So there are two types of comments. If I start or lead the way with 2 dashes, which is what I did there, and anything that follows is a comment. Okay? So just to demonstrate, if I didn't have those 2 dashes, I get some different colors telling me that this particular interface is trying to interpret this as code now, which it isn't, right? So the 2 dashes goes to green, and now I'm free to write whatever it is. So this is called a comment line, right? A line of comment. If I go to the next line and I try to type, it's going to be that discolored saying it's not a comment, okay? So that's one type of comment that I can start with. The other type of comment is a comment block. And how do I do a comment block? That is a front slash, then a star, and then I go a couple lines down and do a star and a front slash. Anything between there becomes a comment. So this is a comment. I could go to the second line, and unlike the comment line, I don't have to be worried about this being interpreted as code. It's same color, green, denoting that it is indeed a comment. So I could do like that. Okay, so comment line up here, comment block. Okay, pretty straightforward, pretty straightforward. But as I said, I am going to be jumping back here to see if there are any questions, and I see there are none so far, so awesome. I'm going to keep pushing. All right. So comment line, comment block. Seems straightforward. Okay, why is this? So this is one of those things I'm going to stress, which if I did kind of stress it in the course, but I want to stress it now that, we're all here. It is considered a best practice. And this is one of those things you can totally ignore, right? You're not being held to this. But why is this considered a best practice? Because in the professional field, when you go out there as a data analyst to work in any given company, this is sort of the professional etiquette that you're going to inherit when you see pieces of code or SQL scripts that you're going to be working with. You're going to see people professionally with professional etiquette leaving descriptions about the code that they're writing. And this is out of just really professional courtesy, out of productivity, so that you could instantly know what's happening with a given piece of code without going line by line through maybe hundreds of lines of code. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's make it a little more intelligent, right? So what we usually do with a piece of code or a SQL script is we say created by. Who created this? And I'll just put myself. And equally as important is when was it created? Okay, so today is okay, and a description. So this is very important, right? What is it that this piece of code is doing? This is your big clue, right? Your professional etiquette that you're leaving to yourself and to others. So what is this? This is maybe which is what we're going to talk about now, right? The basic structure of a query. All right, so this is really, even to this day, if I were to walk into company XYZ and I were to start composing my query, this is what I would start with, right? My name, the date, and a brief description of what I'm about to compose as far as a query and what it does, okay? All right, let's keep going. my professional etiquette is to jump back here and check for questions. Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep encouraging questions. That's the whole point. Feel free. There's no such thing as a not like a not appropriate question, meaning like a not smart question, or nobody's going to understand that, or everybody's going to think that's a not so smart question. Please ask questions, because everything that you think that you don't know, believe me, there's many more that do not. So that's going to be filling a gap for a lot of other folks. Okay, let's keep going. So we're at this point, we're ready to actually get into SQL, the actual code, the actual syntax. So what can we say? Let's lead the way. Instead of and if you know in the course, that's why we lead with a lot of examples. It's harder to learn this code if you just kind of, well, what is SQL select, what this, no. Really what this is, SQL is a translation of a real world request. So imagine that you would have a request from XYZ management to say, hey, I need to have a list, a report of our customers, their first names, their last names, and their email addresses. Okay. Now you, Mr. or Mrs. Data Analyst, your job is to now go back to your database that you're familiar with and now get that data back to your business and fulfill that request. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, we don't just dive into the code here. We remind ourselves of the database structure, right? And the question was, let us get a list of customers, and we would like specific information about the customers. We want their first names, their last names, and their email addresses. So in our examination of our database here and the tables that it contains, we're going to say, well, what most likely is going to be able to fulfill that request? And if we look through our list here, we see that there is a customer table. And if we open the fields of this table, we could see, yes, there is a first name, there is a last name, and if we look down here, there is an email address. So that's our first step, confirmation of where to navigate to get our data. Now we go back to actually do our composition. So here we get into our first piece of syntax, or our first piece of SQL code, and that is the from clause. It's first official way. So FROM. So we say from is like saying, okay, go to this area. And we just examine and we want to go to a specific table. That's our first stop. What table do we go to? And we just saw that the customers table contains the data that we would like. So I'm pausing here to show the pop-up here, which is called IntelliSense, or it's just meant to help us reduce our typing. And this is showing us two things here. One is the table name, customer, and that's denoted by this particular symbol or icon, and customer ID, which is the field within the customer table. So there are two different types of objects, and this is the official way to refer to them. And we want to go with the table, because within the from clause of SQL, you want to start with the table. Remember, it's saying, where do I go in this database? In this 11 tables, which table do you want? And we want the customer table. So I just click on that customer table. I don't have to type out the whole word customer. So this is effectively saying, go to the customer table. So let's jump back here one more time again. We're interested in specific fields, right? In the customer table, there are many fields, right? We don't want fields that are not requested. And we could get into that a little more, and that's for query efficiency's sake. And I'll get into the best practice of that in a little more. But we do not want to reference fields that are not requested. We want the first name, the last name, and the email address. So let's go back now to our execute SQL. And we want to go above the from clause and put our second clause, which is the select clause. And by the way, IntelliSense does pop up for the various SQL clauses as well, in addition to the tables and the fields. So select, and then what's next? we want specific field. We want the first name. And we can see that IntelliSense is sparing us some typing. I'm just going to type on that. And then I want the last name. So I'm just going to pause here at this point and say this is actually a fully legal SQL statement. Had this been the request, that's it, we're done. Okay? Give me all the customer first names. Here we go. And I could hit run here, and here we go. But that's not the full request. We want the customer first name, we want the last name, and the email address. So in addition to the first name, we want to include the last name. So a comma denotes get ready for a second field or a second column. So now I could tap into any of the other available fields in the customer table by way of me saying from customer here. So now I want the first name, the last name, sorry. So we already have the first name. So let's go last name. IntelliSense to the rescue there. Double click, saves me some time. All right, I have the last name, and I'm going to go ahead and put yet another comma and say email. And if I recall, that's the email there, and I'm going to just click on that and include the email field. Now we have more of a fully equipped request here. We have the first name, we have the last name, and we have the email address. Now let's go ahead and run our query here. Okay, looking good. We got the first name, last name, email address, and if we look closely, we do have things looking good, but some things aren't great, right? For instance, the first name is all smushed together and the last name. And why is this, right? Why is there not a space or formatted well? And you're going to encounter this many times in databases across various companies. This is the data modeling versus the business side of things. In data modeling, it's much more efficient to have database table names and field names in a particular manner like this, more efficient. When it comes to the business side, of course, it's not that efficient to call things like this. So we have ways of actually being more of a translator, sitting in this seat of data analyst. We could now say, hey, let's create some more business appropriate language by means of what's called aliases. So now I can alias these columns and call them more appropriate to the business world names, right? So let's go ahead and do that for the first name. And I'm going to do that by including the keyword as. So first name, keyword as, and now I could go ahead and say first space name. Okay, so I want to point out something that's important and has come up as a question a lot. So we cannot, this is going to create an error for ourselves if we include this first name, first space name, let me be specific, without surrounding this with some sort of legal operator, right? Or legal symbol. And those symbols are, or characters are, double quotes. So I must surround this in double quotes for this to be legal. So now let me run this. And what has happened? Let's take a look at our output here. First name, unlike last name, has a space in it. So this is one thing that we must understand, that once your alias has a space in it, it must have a legal operator to surround it so that it is interpreted correctly when you execute this query. So let's do so for our last name as well. Let's do as, and the business is going to recognize this last space name. So let's do a different type of wrapping around this. Square brackets, LAST space name. So we went a different route, different type of surrounding, but let's run this, same effect. last name is now nicely formatted, more like what the business can understand. Okay. And for some reason, the business wants email capitalized. That's just how they do things in the business world here at this in this particular company. So let's do that for this last particular field. And we do as, and unlike first name, last name, because email is simply just going to have a change that does not require a space, we do not have to surround this with anything. So we just say email, capitalize, and we run this, and our output reflects that. Okay, so this is a good point for me to jump over, see if there are any questions here. Okay, could you explain a bit how to find all the relations between MySQL tables? So that question is a little outside the scope. If you want to send me a question, so two things I'll say about MySQL. We're focused on SQLite for this course, but it's going to touch on pretty much all of the same concepts that you would have to execute. If you saw from the very first chapter, there is like I mentioned, let's say a 5% difference. We're working on SQLite, like I mentioned, but there's Oracle, there's SQL Server, there's MySQL, and to these various database management systems, there's just like about a 5% difference with regard to the syntax. With that being said, you're still going to get 95% of the value just by absorbing whatever you learn in any one of these systems. Okay, so that's one thing. As far as the relationships, we are going to get to that. We're just not there yet. We're going chapter by chapter. Right now, we're in chapter 4. Just to kind of show you things here, we're on chapter 4 right now, right? But we are going to get down to relationships, right? And joins and so forth in chapter 5 and 6 and so forth, right? So stay tuned for that if you want to get into that. But right now, we're just going to cover the content that is here currently. Okay? So good questions, though. I like that they're being asked. Let me just see if there's anything else. Is it 2 spaces before first name, personal preference, or 2 spaces before first name? Oh, okay, let's see that if I understand the question. So the 2 spaces before first name here. So there must be a space here. If I'm interpreting the question correctly, there must be a space after the field name. So how it goes is this is the field name from the customer table. So this is the raw table. This is why this query will work as it is. Now we're just padding things on with making things look nice for the business. And to do that, we leave a space after that field name, put the keyword as, another space, and then followed by whatever our alias is, surrounded by these various types of quotes. And that's basically the full way the syntax goes. So I hope I answered the question correct there. If not, just drop another clarity in there and I'll be happy to revisit that question. But I like it. I love it. I love it. Keep the questions coming. And let's keep pushing. Let's keep going here. All right. Now we have things looking a little better, right? So here comes XYZ manager. Hey, you know what, Mr. Mrs. Data analyst, great job. This report looks great. We could do a lot with it, but, we're having trouble finding the various records. Usually our business have our records sorted by last name. Can you improve this report for us, right? So this is going to introduce for us on the data analyst side. Sure, no problem. But we're going to have to now introduce another clause, which is the order by clause. So we go below the from clause. So far, we have the select, we have the from, we have the various fields, we have the table, right? So now below everything that we've had so far, now we introduce a new clause, which is the order by. 2 separate words, order by, and then I am going to put the field which was requested for the business to do their jobs a little better, which is to have that last name field sorted. And she didn't really say it, so we're just going to assume it's going to be in ascending order, and that is from A through Z. So let's put below that order by clause the last name, and we're going to say ASC right after that to denote or to specify that this field should be sorted in ascending order. All right, so now let's just run everything. Let's just take a note first of our last name field. It starts with a G, then K, so definitely not sorted at the moment. And now let's run this query, and we see starting with the A and going all the way down, we can see that it is indeed sorted now. So by means of our introduction of this clause, the order by clause, and specifying what direction we want this particular field sorted, we have now improved our report. We could go back and say, hey, here's the report, now improved as requested with this particular clause. Okay. All right. One thing I want to pause and point out here as I take a sip of water. Talking a lot. But one thing I want to point out, super important, may not be that obvious. So just as we said, professional etiquette in terms of dropping a comment, dropping a description of what's going on with this query. Same thing, professional etiquette best practice to format your query in this manner. And just as there's nothing stopping me from doing this and just saying, hey, next person, or hey to myself, I'm just going to go through the hard grind on figuring this out line by line instead of leaving a nice comment to tell me it in 2 seconds. So nothing is stopping me from formatting this in this manner, right? I am deliberately putting carriage returns and spacing in the indentations in this manner, leaving the select clause, the from clause, the order by clause up against the left here, and going one line lower and indenting whatever comes below that. That is purely for readability's sake, purely for the ability for you to sift through and decipher what's going on with your query much more quickly, just by the way that the human eye reads things, right? So there's nothing stopping me, for instance, from doing this, right? I can do this. This whole query will run the very same way. Run this query here, no problem. Perfectly legal query, but it's tough to read now, right? And imagine this multiplied by maybe hundreds of queries written like this. Now it becomes really chaotic. So this, again, is just a best practice for us to format things this way deliberately, nothing stopping us. And guess what? In the professional realm, once you step in here and someone sees you formatting your queries like this, they understand, okay, you know something about the professional etiquette in terms of best practices. Okay, so just another tip your way there. All right, let's keep going. Not too much more again, but we're going to refine things even more. Okay, I'm going to just jump over here, check for our questions. Awesome. All right. All right. So let me see something here. So the indentation to field. Okay, good. So I think we just covered that. Hopefully that's what you're talking about. Yes, the indentation is exactly what I just mentioned. Professional etiquette in terms of keeping things with regard to what's referred to as a best practice. So I love the question because that's exactly what I wanted to pause and talk about. And you actually asked it before I got to it. So yes, extremely important, by the way, right? So great question. All right, let's keep going. So let's say, all right, management is happy, right? This thing is ordered, great. You know, could we just kind of see an alternate view? Maybe we want to flip this thing around. Can we see it sorted in a descending order? Well, that's no problem. Well, that's just a flip of this keyword right here, right? Instead of ASC, you go DESC, and that tells your interpreter here that you want your results interpreted in descending order. And as I ran that, you could see that Z is now in position number 1, right? And that says that now we're sorting in descending order, that is Z to A. And that, again, is just another simple way, but effective, that you could fulfill requests, right? So right now, what our simple query is starting to shape up pretty well, right? We have our query tapped into the exact table that we want, which is the customers table. We have the exact fields that we want, first name, last name, email. We're speaking to the business by means of aliasing those fields. We're also sorting our results by way that the business has requested. So our query here is simple, but kind of, tricked out a little, right? So we're not doing too bad. So one of the things I want to point out as before I go forward here, and why are comments cool and you could do things? So let's say I wanted to experiment with this query. I didn't want to start all over again. I could just quickly start saying, you know what, let me try something else. Let me put some other fields in here. So now I've easily commented that out. Went to one too many. So let me go down here. Commented that out. And I just want to draw a point. You could put a star. Maybe you've seen this a lot when you go Google SQL and you see a star. A star gives you every single column that is in the table, right? And when we get to joins, let's say you have joined to 2 or 3 or 4 tables, it will give you every single column in those 2 or 3 or 4 tables. Now, this is considered an inefficient way of writing a query. Again, another best practice. Someone goes out there, you are in a company and you're now said, hey, compose a query, and you say, here you go, and you see a star in many of your queries, people are going to say, hey, what's up? Like, no, this is not the way to go. And why is that? So let's run this query really quickly here. I'm going to run this select star. And now we've gone from those 3 columns, which we in our original query, to as many columns as there are in the customers table. Now, I want to point out one thing. 11 milliseconds, right? Now, think of Google. Think of any, this behind the nuts and bolts is queries being executed when you put in your search in Google, right? So imagine if your Google search is now taking minutes instead of seconds. And when your database starts growing, right now we just have a nice, neat sample database with nice, neat records. But think of hundreds of millions, billions of records, which is what you deal with when you start getting into big data. And stars really are frowned upon when you start looking at databases that size, as you imagine. You then start going from minutes from seconds to minutes when you put stars in your query. So frowned upon, and let's just take a look at that 11 seconds. Now let's revert back to our original query, which is much more efficient, much more written in a best practice, and remove some of our comments here and rerun this. And let's take a look at our milliseconds. Even in our little database here, and that tells you something about the efficiency of query writing. You want to be, we've saved what? We went from 6, say 5 milliseconds there. Multiply this when, again, this gets exponential when as your data grows. So just getting in the best practice of selecting only the columns that you need when you are composing your queries is definitely a best practice. And as you can see, is an efficient way of writing your queries. Okay. All right. Coming down to the last lap, as they say here at Carnival in Trinidad. So let's go with one more request. So the management says, hey, you know what? This is the best report we've ever had in this company. Like, you're amazing. So the next thing we want is, we don't want everybody under the sun. We want to get some targeted things going. So We just want, just 20, let's say 10 customers. We just want to test 10 customers. So we don't want all 60. By the way, you can tell in our messages window here, which is what this area is called, how many rows as well, in addition to the time where we just took a look at. And we could tell we're getting all 60 rows of this table. So now we want to limit how many rows we return. And to do that, we include yet another clause which comes after the order by clause. And that is the limit. So if I say limit, put the keyword, and again, nothing's stopping me from writing in the same line as limit except my best practice. So I go in the next line and I say, I want to limit this by the number of records I want to limit this by. And let's say it's 10. So I say limit 10, and now I run this query. And now what has happened? I could tell in my row, in my messages window, my total rows does say 10. If I scroll down, I could see I now have the 10 rows, right? Now, this is exactly the type of query. Imagine this, a much more advanced query. But if you wanted to examine the top 10 best-selling products, your top 10 most repeat customers, whatever it is, this is the way that you're going to limit those records or that view or that whatever chart. The SQL syntax below this is indeed a limit clause, okay? All right. So, I'm going to jump back over here. Okay. All right. Awesome. Nice. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ian, it's my pleasure, sir. All right. So we're kind of coming down to the end of things here. So let me just make sure that we're keeping apples to apples. All right. So here's what we kind of went down. We talked about commenting. We talked about the query composition. We talked about best practices. Hopefully I emphasized that enough. Custom names, AKA aliasing. We talked about that. We sorted our records in ascending and descending order. We also limited our records. And we had so that was it from top to the bottom as far as chapter 4. But I thought, hey, why not? Let's do this coding challenge, right? Why not? So I did get a few questions about this, so let's go through it really quickly here, and we'll kind of end on this here right here. So we say Red 30 Tech wants to generate a straightforward report showcasing their track offerings along with price defaults to enhance their database management processes. And here's our task: to generate a report listing track names alongside their unit prices. And they want a report containing the track names with the track names and the price. Okay, so the track names contains a list of track names, the price fields, the unit price of each track, and it must only have 20 tracks stored. So kind of gave it away here a little, but it's already here composed. This is what I was doing just to get it through, but let us walk through, okay? Some of the things, and this is a good hint just to tackle some of the other challenges that are in the course. So the hints give you quite a bit of hint, right? It tells you the table, all right? And we know that's our first step. Our first step in any database is what table, out of all the list of tables, once we are sure of the database, well, what tables within that database are we interested in, okay? So in this case, we're interested in the track table. And it says the track table should be aliased as T. And by the way, we didn't really see that in the chapter per se, but just as powerfully as an alias can be applied to the column, it can be applied, as you see, to the table. So this is the entire table being aliased as T. All right. So once we have specified the track table, then we go into saying what has been requested, the name and the unit price. Those are the two fields. And they should be aliased as track name, and we've just used the double quotes. And we have used the as price, no quotes needed because it does not have a space. And then, last but not least, they say it must only include the first 20 tracks sorted by name, right? So we're ordering by name, and then we are only including the 20 tracks when we say limit 20, right? And then we test my code here, and boom. And that's it. All right, and that kind of ends off the chapter right there, okay? All right, woo! That was fun. That was fun. That was fun. That was good. That was good. That was good. All right. All right, yeah. Yeah, the coding challenges are by CoderPad. It is slightly different, but I will say that it is good to have that difference, and that's a great point, Lisa. It is good to have that difference because difference is simply a part of what you're going to encounter as you go into a professional environment, right? And I can say that safely with, let's say, Microsoft SQL Server, which you probably bound to encounter as you compose SQL statements. But just how that is configured from one place to another might be very different, right? So it's good to have these little differences baked in because that's just part of a skill to develop and just getting comfortable with that difference, right? So great point. Great point. All right. I'm going to wrap things up here now. Move that here. You know, I had something all queued up here. Let me try to do it the right way. Right here. Okay. All right. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but this is a guy called Sizzler. I told you I'm a reggae fan, so I want to just end on this good note and just say thank you so very much for tuning in with me this Tuesday. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for being interactive. Thank you for asking questions. I will be having another session. So we'll be going from chapter 4 to chapter 5. So stay tuned for that. As you know, I'll probably try to get things sent out, if not today, this week. Happy 4th of July to each and everyone. Whatever you do is a big family day, so hopefully you have the best of times with you and yours. And if you're just chilling on your own, just have the best of time with you and you. All right, so thanks again for coming out. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for being interactive. And look out for the next session. Talk to you soon.
And the perfume still linger. Oh, time, remember, girl, where we coming from. Oh, I'm the one to whom you belong. Oh, yeah. Girl, you keep me small. You and you alone, no other one. Why does it have to be this way? I can't tell you to